Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Industry Connections. And today we have Broadway Media with us. They are one of our corporate partners, and they provide wonderful discounts to our membership to help them, improve and take advantage of all the wonderful things that they offer to our membership at a discounted price. Today we have Heather Supa, we have Cameron Sasso Briggs, and we have Don Berlin, all terrific representatives of Broadway Media. So I'm going to turn this over to Cameron and let him start the presentation, and y'all have a wonderful time.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. If someone could pop in the chat and just make sure to let me know you can see it. I'm excited to go over the details of what I believe is the way to unlock the magic of projections, which really is going to help bring your stage to life. The first thing I want to do, of course, is introduce ourselves. The quick intro is that we're Broadway Media. We're all theater makers here, from directors, costume designers. We have members who sit on boards of community theaters, professional theater makers. We use all of our real life experience to influence what we create and what we develop here at Broadway Media. I personally work in and outside of Broadway Media in theater. I help run a small theater company I started with my spouse, as well as I work freelance as a photographer, sound designer, lighting designer. And within Broadway Media, I'm our production manager of digital scenery. So I get a very hands-on experience with how to not only build some physical scenery, but also how we go over our digital scenery as well. With me, I have a couple other friends. I'll pass it over to Heather to kind of take over the next piece.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Supe, Broadway Media's Community Success Manager. I grew up in community theater and spent many years performing with the Walt Disney Company and their theme parks and cruise line. Today, I'm a proud theater mom, and I feel truly honored that my work here at Broadway Media supports community theater productions around the world. We've been in business for over a decade and have created more than 300 individual show packages. And now I'm excited to pass this off to Don Berlin.
Thanks, Heather. My name is Don Berlin, and I'm Director of Marketing here at Broadway Media. I got involved in theater very early in school, and it saved my life. It saved my grades. It gave me a home and a place to express myself. Out of college, I started my own community theater called Trouble Clef Theater Company, and we produce new and little-known works of musical theater. I've directed, I've produced, and was fortunate enough to direct professionally for a Lord III dinner theater, the Candlelight Dinner Theater here in Colorado. Theater is in my blood and it's my life, and it's so wonderful to be with Tribe today. So thank you all for joining us. We have, in our time, worked with more than 20 Broadway professionals on production assets. As Heather mentioned, a package for every must-produce show, as well as scenic backdrops, projections, and choreography guides, working with some of Broadway's best choreographers to create guides that allow you and your company to learn the moves step by step, and easily integrate dazzling choreography into your productions. Our creative team works directly with book writers, authors, licensors, and media providers, including, but not limited to, Music Theater International, Disney Theatrical, TRW, Harry Potter World, Tina Fey and the producers of Mean Girls, and award-winning production designers such as Aaron Rhine, Frey Studios, and Peter Negrini. As the licensed approved partner, we've worked with over 20,000 community theaters and school theater programs in our 12 years in business. I'm going to turn it back over to Cameron.
So in my time at Broadway Media, we very much shifted sort of what we expect to interact and how we expect to interact with our customers into a very much education forward basis. We really like to take the time to make sure everyone has an understanding of digital scenery and how it can work in their unique and individual space with their unique and individual show. So I am going to run most of the presentation. Heather and Don are here to make sure as we have questions come in the chat, we can answer them as we go through. If you think of anything, feel free to either put a question in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll try and make sure we respond to it right away so you can get those questions answered in real time with what we're talking about. Where I want to start today is with some common barriers that community theaters run into, not only with digital scenery, but kind of in a broad sense. What are we all running into as we start to develop our seasons and our theater companies? And a question I find myself asking a lot as I make theater and as I grew up in theater is, does it make participation in the performing arts more accessible? Now, with the AACT, pretty much every person who's hearing my voice right now is investing their time and resources in building something that is fully accessible by their community and easily accessible. But some of those common barriers we're all going to run into are things like a lack of funding. There's a lack of government funding, state funding, personal funding, as well as rising costs and availability of those materials we need to put on a show. I'm sure everybody remembers from the COVID era, the cost of lumber really shot through the roof, and the availability of that lumber went the opposite direction. So it started to make how we did theater become something we had to be a little bit more conscientious of and thoughtful of as we prepare for our seasons. Sourcing volunteers is often an issue we run into as there's so much turnover in our community theaters. It's something I think is amazing. We have so many young students coming in and leaving our programs having learned a lot and working toward being young professionals. But that means that their parents come and go as well, and they're usually who we rely on as we start building up the program. Rehearsal time is often an issue. We have to pay for the space. We have to work with everybody else's timings. Venue limitations. I know our general manager works for a community theater herself, and she has done many productions with that company in theater spaces they either had to share in between their show dates, so they had to come in and out, or they only had access to for the week or two of show dates. As well as probably the hardest thing in theater, which is attracting and retaining an audience, a group of people who permanently want to come to our shows and really start to understand that. So as we move forward, we're going to try and address some of these things and how digital scenery can help solve some of these issues, or at least help alleviate some of those issues. But the first thing I want us to look at as we think about digital scenery for our spaces is that the most important piece of all of this, as we do anything for a show, is to focus on our storytelling devices and then think about how do we select the content and materials we're going to use to support that show. Now, digital scenery, I love it and really enjoy working with it and understanding how it's going to continue to be applied to theater. But there are times where it should definitely be used and times where it probably shouldn't be used. Some of those times I find where it's really helpful to have digital scenery are magical moments where we need some kind of transformation, either of the set or of a character to happen. Our audience needs some help either tracking the timeline of the show or our location. Oftentimes shows jump between locations. And with community theaters, our audience isn't always necessarily theater goers. It's a lot of parents and loved ones who really care for these young performers, but maybe have no context of what a musical is supposed to be like. Digital scenery can also help us extend the dimensions of our space. It can really expand and make a space that may not be very physically large feel almost infinite. There are times where the story really needs it. I think Let It Go is a great example in Frozen, where we need to build an ice castle and people are expecting that. How do we do that practically, quickly, safely, and cost effectively? Or your production just needs it. Like I mentioned with space restrictions, venue restrictions, digital scenery can help us with some of those issues we may run into. There are also times we should not use it. Digital scenery could be distracting. If we were to give you a piece of digital scenery that's supposed to be a classroom and there were paper bags flying through and butterflies coming through, it would take away from a scene that should feel very still. Or it gets in the way of the author's intent or the story's message. Or in some large musical numbers, like Be Our Guest, when you have 1,000 community members all on stage as forks and spatulas, we want to be able to see all of them. And when the lighting needs to be the focus and the lighting is a part of the star of those moments, sometimes that can wash out our scenery, and the scenery should come secondary to those moments. As we look at our spaces and how do we sort of set those up after we've looked at what's our story, how do we want to tell that story, and how can digital scenery help with that, then we start looking at how do we do this in the room? How do we actually set this up? Well, with digital scenery, I think things are fairly simple, and there are three main elements that you need to think about and need to have in the space to run and execute the digital scenery with your show. The first thing is a computer with some kind of queuing software. There are licensed programs like QLab is one of the main ones I hear programs using, but there's also ProPresenter, Watch Out. I've seen programs use PowerPoint. I've seen everything you can imagine. These you go out and either get a license for the software or you use a free version. You would then go obtain materials from somewhere else for the scenery, cue the show, and input all of that into your licensed software. At Broadway Media, we've sort of pushed two steps together and we've included queuing software with all of our performance materials. So we provide fully script accurate show packages, which I'll touch into more, built into Stage Player, our queuing software, which is going to be fully queued for you based on the script with all your page numbers, act numbers, scene numbers built in for you, ready to go. So there's a lot of options as far as the computer and the software, but it's very probable that your program has access to something that will function very well for them in this first step. The next thing is something most programs also have access to something they can use, and that's a projection surface. A lot of programs have a cyclorama across the back wall or have a storage warehouse full of flats that they paint year after year, or a light wall or light colored surfaces that they can already use either in the space or they've already paid for and kept. You can project onto almost any surface. I've seen a lot of really creative choices. I saw a program of Bonnie and Clyde project onto palettes. So you got some really nice depth and texture because the slats of the palettes let some of the imagery shine through. I've seen programs use televisions mostly to give the scene and setting for some of our junior productions, where it's very much an educational show more than it is a full theatrical production, but it still shows where we are to the people watching the show. I've also seen worship screens, programs that share a space with the church, put it high up on stage left and right, and again, give that scene and setting. The last bullet there, LED walls, is something I'm seeing become more and more popular. I find that cost-wise to purchase new, they're a little bit cost prohibitive, especially to high schools and community theaters right now. But as professional theater companies are starting to phase into the second era of LED walls, I'm seeing more and more programs start to get used ones to be able to display imagery and scenery on. Now, if we're not using an LED wall, that third and last thing to display on those surfaces we may already have is a projector. Now, there are a lot of projectors out there. Most programs have access to a projector of some kind. And within projectors, it's a pretty wide spectrum. There's long throw, there's short throw, there's ultra short throw. Long throw projectors is what we see in most traditional spaces and most spaces that have a little bit older tech, maybe within the last 10 years or 15 years, they had a remodel done. And these projectors are really powerful, but that's what you see in a movie theater. It's about as far away as you can get from the stage, and it ends up casting across our little actor here on the space. as they try and perform. So that's not ideal for a theatrical setting. So then we start looking at ultra short and short throw projectors. These can either be used with rear projection, which fully avoids shadows, but does require quite a bit of upstage space to be taken. It's about somewhere between 8 and 15 feet of space on average, as well as a specialty surface. But what most programs are doing is front projection with a short or ultra short throw projector. You still need that 8 to 15 feet of mounting distance, but with it overhead, you're running into that scenery somewhere between 4 and 7 feet from that surface. So most of your stage space is still available. I see a question about the LED wall brands and tech specs I would recommend. I would recommend the highest quality output you can get as HD as possible. And as far as a brand, I don't have any I personally recommend, just because I've only worked with a handful of options, and I know that every day newer and newer technologies come. So most programs work with this front projection with short throw projectors. And now we start asking the question of, okay, I have those two things, a computer and a surface to project onto. I don't have one of those short throw projectors, which is really built for theater. So then we start asking, how do we figure that out? Which one do I need? There's so many. There's hundreds of brands and models and lumen counts and price ranges. So what we really need to consider is how large of an image do we want, the size, and what are our lighting conditions? Do we have really high-tech, all LED, all motorized equipment that we have a ton of control over? Or are we using some secondhand or hand-me-down equipment from some of the local programs that you're still making work, but are mostly on or off? I know where I started doing theater, there were white lights that we could put gels on, and they were either on or off. There was no dimming, there was no any of that. So we have to start really thinking about how much control do we have over the light in the space. Now, as we look at those short throw projectors, the difference is their throw ratio compared to a standard throw projector. Standard throw is 1-to-1 throw ratio or 2-to-1. That first number is how many feet we have to move backward to get the second number, which is 1 foot wider. So that means if you want a 20-foot image with a long throw projector, it's 40 feet away. On the other hand, short throw projectors are 1/2 foot to 1 foot of width. So every 1/2 foot we move back, we can be 1 foot away and have a 2-foot wide image. At Broadway Media, I can especially speak on projectors that have a throw ratio of 0.24-to-1 or 0.35-to-1 because I work with them every day. I do that math over and over and over. These projectors are able to go anywhere from as small as you would like up to almost 50 or 60 feet wide. So even productions that are using very large spaces still feel really comfortable utilizing short throw projectors to fill that space and still battle their stage lights. So now we've talked about the hardware and some of the software. Now let's look at how you can bring the show to life in your space. The first way a lot of programs start doing this is full set replacements. They use this like painted backdrops, and most of our scenic information and visual information is going to come from one projected image all the way on the back row. Some programs will shrink that projected space just to make the image a little brighter or to make it feel a little more homey as they go. I find this is a really great way to utilize it if we're in one of those spaces that we're sharing and we have to load in and out constantly. This is a great option. For programs that have a more permanent space or like some of that traditional scenic design elements, a lot of programs find the most success with integrated scenery, a little bit of both. This photo is from a production of Mamma Mia, where they still wanted doors to enter and exit from, windows to lean in and out of. They still wanted some things for them to be interacting with and experiencing in that world. And they built their scenery with the digital scenery in mind to make sure it all was cohesive and felt really natural. I find that this gives the most added dimension and value to our productions. Then we start to get into advanced techniques, projection mapping. This image is a pretty basic version of projection mapping where they have a center image and a right and a left image. This can be a little bit of an undertaking as it's fairly limitless with what you can do and what is possible. It mostly comes down to the technician's skill set and how much time you have to invest into doing projection mapping. We offer options for all of those, and we offer assistance as you're picking what is the best version of digital scenery for our space. There are a few other tips and tricks I like to throw in just at the very end of this. I love that digital scenery is kind of the inverse of how old scenery used to work. We used to get a model maybe 6 months before, then they would start building it. We run out of budget. The model has changed, so our blocking changes when we get into Tech Week. With digital scenery, you can have access to it as early as you have your licensing. So you can review the projections for all your blocking needs. You can ensure your lighting designer is able to work with the projections, not only to design the show in a color palette that matches the scenery you'll have, but also to be able to start working on, okay, where do I need to rely more on my cooler hues and tones of light to let the projection really stand out? And where can I lean on those whites and yellows and oranges that are going to wash the imagery out a little bit more? I also think we need to think about the surface we perform on. The floor can be reflective and cause issues with the imagery. It's something to be cognizant of. That isn't a huge issue, but it is when you get to Tech Week and you haven't thought about it at all. And also know the impact your follow spots are going to have. Just like any other warm light, it's going to wash out some of that imagery. So you can start to pick and choose, where do we want our performer to stand and where is that follow spot going to hit in the scenery? And is that taking out some visual information that is integral to our story? So now we've talked about how to do it in your space. Now let's look at how to pick and choose what version of digital scenery you want to be using. Where should you look? Who should you talk to? And how can you start to set your program up for success? Now, there are a lot of choices, but I find it really comes down to three main ones as of this moment. There's AI. I always like to throw that one out first because it's a hot topic right now. We're all looking at it and how can it be a tool for us? I think AI is just that, a really great tool. I think that there are some questions about its environmental impacts, as well as its intellectual property, possibilities of crossing lines, or maybe making something that doesn't necessarily feel as real to us. It's always an option out there, but it often is collected and chosen and designed without the cohesiveness that a designer would put into a show. So we end up getting something a little disjointed, some things that may have some artifacts left in them, but is a choice that programs are starting to lean into as they discover what AI can do for their productions. The next is hiring a private designer, someone freelance. They're able to build your show from scratch and really start to develop that product with you. I find that this is a really excellent way to exactly get your vision in place and exactly what you're hoping to see exactly right. I think that that's a really great choice if you have the time. What can be difficult with that is, as we know with many of our designers on our production teams, is often production teams fall behind because there's more work than we thought, or we're doing more edits. And a production team is great to hire if you have enough leeway. If it's a short period, I find it's a little bit difficult to work with a designer to immediately have something within a few months that's cohesive and involves the entirety of the package. Then there's how we work. At Broadway Media, we are we're the only licensor-approved scenic designer for MTI, Disney Theatrical, Broadway Licensing, and TRW. So we work with those licensors to create content for them and with their approval and with their wants in mind. They're fully script accurate. So we not only get the script as we design the show, but we also get updates on the script. So as Mean Girls has had a few updates throughout the years, we're able to keep up with those changes and make sure they're following what the new script asks for. Speaking of Mean Girls, we work directly from Broadway. We're able to carry the handful is getting larger and larger, a little harder to count on one hand, of shows we've gotten direct from Broadway with those developers and those original designers, which not only helps you achieve the ideal visual idea of the show that the original creators had for it, but also lets you get access to materials that are far above and beyond what any of our local designers can make. And honestly, it is one of the most impressive things we can give to our young performers. We're using the Broadway scenic designs from Anastasia, and it looks exactly the same and feels the same. We also really try and make it a point to solve for some of that tricky stage business. As we go through scripts, I get to help develop these. So I just got to look at Come From Away, and we went through and studied the actual geographical locations mentioned in the show and found historical photos to match all of that. Or for other productions, there are a bunch of other solves. We've put together a little video that I think really shows a bunch off. The first one is from Anastasia. I think this is one of those examples when our audience needs it. They travel all over the place, and it helps a ton to have it say St. Petersburg, 1906. We know where we are and when we are. For The Little Mermaid, I love this segment when Ariel gets her legs and gives up her voice, but it's really tricky to pull off on stage. So we get a bright white flash of light and a silhouette of someone with legs swimming up to the surface, where we can have our Ariel exit, do a quick change. By the time we transition to the surface, she's ready to go walk around on, what do you call them? Feet? Monty Python calls for rabbits being flung out of the castle and through the air. And Mean Girls relies really heavily on technology and is a show that was designed with digital scenery. So there are some really great examples there of when a show is really asking for it, not only from the professional and original productions, but in a way that might just be difficult for our audiences to kind of keep up with and follow. So if those pre-queued show packages don't sound like the right fit for your production, we also have a digital backdrops library. It has over 3,000 animated scenic designs that you can pick and choose and put together your own custom vision. This is also really great for dance recitals, orchestra recitals. If you're doing a voice recital or maybe a fundraiser where it's just people singing, it adds more and more dimension. We're really glad we got to spend some time with you guys today. If there are more questions, please drop them in the Q&A or the webinar chat. You can also email us, hello@broadwaymedia.com. We would love to say hi. Or you can go to our website, broadwaymedia.com, where you can preview every scene and setting for every show within our entire catalog of shows. If you ever have any questions, you can reach out to us. And if you'd even like to talk to me directly in your email, say, hey, Cameron, it was great seeing you at the AACT conference webinar. I'd love to get some more questions answered. We're so excited and glad to partner with AACT, and we really feel like we're getting to be a part of community theaters across America and across the world as we continue to expand. I hope everyone has a really great day, and if there are any questions, we're just going to hang out and make sure we answer them all.
Well, and in the meantime, I'm going to interject that we have recorded all of this, and this will be kept on our website under Industry Connections. So if you missed a piece, or if you have another team member at your theater that you would like to have view it, you can log on to our website and then watch this entire process unfold. But this has been fabulous. I don't know if we've, oh, I see something in the Q&A.
Yeah, I see. Kirk asked if it's possible to license our content for non-theatrical productions, specifically for event production, thinking of galas, keynotes, and things like that. So that's a perfect example of what our digital backdrops library is for. It is an unlimited collection. It feels unlimited in its vastness, that you can build your own custom gala work or keynote work, there are things that are almost trippy in nature, almost spirally for your 70s events. We also have like beachfront, oceanfront. We have 1800s hotels and prisons. So really anything you're wanting to do something outside of the theatrical realm, we can find something for that. The only caveat to that is with our scenic projection packages, which we build in tandem with those licensors. We can't rent those out without the show being a part of that deal. But for anything else, you can build those semi-custom packages and do whatever you'd like. A lot of dance recitals are getting into using that scenery to elevate those moments.
Just worked with a client that did that for their choral concert coming up, and there's going to be different backdrops for every single song, and they're just thrilled about what that brings to their audience.
Absolutely. That really, it enhances the production so much, and it makes it workable for smaller groups, or as you say, dance studios, or for events. There's just so many opportunities nowadays to get something to zhuzh it up, as they say.
And if
So
you're a director or producer and you're looking at your script and you go, how in the world are we going to get to 24 locations in Act 1 and 18 locations in Act 2? Projections make those transitions seamless. It's beautiful. We used to have a backstage team that was larger than the front stage team at times to move all the set pieces, right? But if you've got those digital backdrops, it just adds so much to the flow and the energy of your show.
I'm sure everyone has worked with a director who has spent many hours yelling about dead air. In the digital scenery, almost every scene we've built transitions smoothly into the next one, unless the intent of the author is to have a blackout for effect or dramatic feel. So we've built it so these shows can run almost continuous. Mean Girls is a great example of that. It was actually written to be fairly continuous. So there's almost no pauses in that show. And this really helps us cut down on some of that runtime and give our young actors a little bit more freedom to play and a little bit more room for error as they learn how to be young creators themselves.
And one thing I have to say about Broadway Media and your team there is that because of your theater background and knowledge, you are a wonderful resource. You've been a wonderful resource for ACT and have always answered the call when we've had a question or my goodness, how could we solve this kind of thing? So I encourage all of you who are listening to take advantage of these very kind offers to reach out to them and say, we have a question, we have a concern, what can you do for us? Because they love doing what you're doing. And that really, it makes for a really nice partnership. So thank you all for contributing your expertise today and your passion for what you do.
And on our website, there's also a button you can schedule a virtual appointment with us. We offer these pretty much during all business hours, and we love to take time one-on-one with programs because every space is different and every production is different. Something I say to a lot of programs is even if you did Annie this year and next year, they'd be two different shows. We have to approach them differently. So we like to meet with programs to really understand their needs and make sure we build that relationship to understand in the future as well. What do you need as you're growing, not just what do you need season to season to season.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I encourage all of you folks who are listening to reach out if you have questions. And I look forward to having this in our catalog on the website for people to view and our next go around when we meet. So thank you again.